has focused in on things like the bioinformatics aspect of high throughput screening. So you need to understand those typical applications, which is why in our life science group, we'll hire people that have a background in bioinformatics or have a background working with large data sets. Data is so huge now, right now. Over the years, data has become such a large component of what our customers or our clients look at. And the issue is really that they've captured data, but they haven't really evaluated enough of what that data is all about. You're going to see that with the proteomics and genomics, they're looking at the proteins and looking at the genome. Now that we've mapped the human genome, there's so many new things that are open to the life science industry. It's incredible. But it's all data driven. We have terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data that are now out there that you have to do things over that. I think, my personal belief is that over time, you're going to see a lot more knowledge workers going in to look at how data is actually worked together. If you can take patient data out of the healthcare field and tie it back to the research data and try to drive that stuff together, I think that we're going to find out a lot over time. And I think that's a huge area that we're looking at. So if you look at preclinical, there's things like high throughput screening, molecular modeling. There are actually in this industry now, there are places where you can walk into a room and a researcher can actually walk inside of a molecule. It's displayed in 3D. Yeah. That's a totally new, unique way that they can do stuff like that. So understanding that aspect of preclinical. Then as it goes into the clinical trials, it gets out of the lab, it starts to be used on patients. There's a whole different aspect of the development cycle, meaning that we have to understand the concept of clinical trials, electronic submissions. That's the one thing that the FDA has done over the years. People talk about in this industry that sometimes it takes too long to get there, but again, it gets back to safety. The FDA wants to try to speed up how they can look at new submissions. So there's a concept called eSub, it's electronic submission of data. So we work heavily with our customers to deal with electronic submission issues. We talk to when you get past the clinical trials and it's out there in the field, you have to get the healthcare information back from the doctors, and there's adverse events. So if something happens as part of a clinical trial and somebody has a reaction to a drug, it's called an adverse event. So adverse event systems are huge aspects of what we deal with. So from an application layer, you'll see a lot of our people dealing with the application, the business units, and how they deal with the applications, how they interface with the hospital community when they do clinical trials. We work specifically with CROs, contract research organizations that go out and actually do the clinical trials. We have life science customers. You asked earlier about where we were located or where we are.
Yeah.
We specifically are in Groton, Connecticut and Parsippany, New Jersey because of our proximity to research and development capabilities in the life science field. There's a tremendous amount, and we're going to expand our Eastern Mass presence this year because of all the research aspects of the Cambridge, Boston market. We have a lot of clients that do either medical device or pharmaceutical or biotech, and you actually see a convergence today of a lot of medical devices are actually having drugs now impregnated on the surfaces of some of the medical devices and things like that. So there's a way that these companies are actually coming together. So actually working with multiple companies together is a good part of our projects group as well. ITIL actually is the basis for ISO 20000, which is the ISO standard for service management companies, for IT service management companies. So our goal as a company is to become ISO certified over time. It's a long, drawn-out process. You've got to show that you've got all the process procedures in place and that you know how to manage infrastructure. That was a lesson I learned a long time ago, is that in order to manage infrastructure, you can have all the best techies in the world. But if they're not following process procedure, you get very mixed results. So we've driven very hard within our company and within our clients' companies how to run an IT organization based on process procedure and then bring in tool sets to automate some of that.
That's interesting.
And bring a good level of automation to that.
So would you want all your employees to get ISO certified? Is that
well, ISO certification is a company-wide certification. So our company can get ISO certified. What we'll do is we'll work at getting our people ITIL certified.
ITIL, okay.
So ITIL is the individual certification, and there's actually multiple levels. The foundation class, we've actually made a corporate commitment that 100% of our employees will be ITIL Foundation certified. Wow. We also have a number of people that are going to be getting master certification, which is a pretty intense multi-week training course, and a lot of goes into that. So there's a lot of work to get the master certification, but we are committed to having a number of people on our staff having master certification as well.
That's excellent. And you truly are, I think, involved in this change. You mentioned changing an industry, I think, earlier. Is that Is that something that
Well, it was an idea that came to me, and one thing you have to try to do is try to get something that you can get your people around. And I saw so many different ways that they used IT over the years, all the way from the preclinical side, that's before you develop a drug, that's just doing basic research, to the point where you're actually doing human trials and you start getting to the clinical trial section, then all the way through the manufacturing and the distribution of the drugs that are out there. So in that cycle, you look at where computing is used throughout that cycle. One of the things that I want to be able to do is take the lessons that we've learned as a company over the last 12 years and try to influence the rest of the industry. We've seen so many biotech and pharmaceuticals over the years, and every time I walk into it, I think I'm 6 to 10 years back. And I look at where Pfizer was that long ago. Because we've implemented certain technologies, and for us, we developed a concept called good systems practice. In the life science industry, the FDA years ago, an idea came up to us right before one of our shows that we were doing. I had just gone to a good laboratory practice training session.
GLPs, yeah.
GLP.
Yeah.
In the pharmaceutical industry, the FDA mandates that everybody that's going to work in a lab has to go to GLP training. And I read the history of that, and what happened is the FDA thought that all these researchers doing research were going to be doing it the same way. They thought that they were going to keep their notes the same way. They thought throughout the university and the research system that they were going to train researchers how to do it. Well, the reality is everybody did it a different way. So what they said is you need to do it a certain way, and they developed what's called good laboratory practice. They also developed for the manufacturing side a concept called good manufacturing practice. Now, if you know anything about the pharmaceutical life science industry, when you manufacture pharmaceuticals, it's really you're taking what you did at a small scale in a lab, and you're just doing it at a much larger lot scale in the manufacturing setup. So good laboratory practice and good manufacturing practice go hand in hand. We said, why don't we have anything in the data center? Why isn't there a good systems practice? So we developed a concept called good systems practice. And our goal is to try to change an industry by bringing good systems practice, which is really taking what's already out there, things like PMI. PMI stands for the Project Management Institute. And whenever you do projects, major projects, people do it different ways. One of the lessons I learned growing Court Square is the fact that every time I was doing big projects for different customers, regardless of industry, it all depended on the person that I had running the project. It was their background, their training. So I had to figure out a way to be consistent and bring a certain quality to every project that we did. So PMI was the way we did it. So we looked at PMI as that is what we want to have in our PMO, our project management office. I want everybody that reports to that office to have a base level training. So that's where we start. Then what I want to do is once you get something to a managed state and we run a project, we drive it toward a managed state, I want to be able to manage that a certain way. And up until a few years ago, we had developed our own concept called system management strategy that we had been working with at Pfizer for years. But then we latched onto a concept called ITIL, which was, sometimes when you develop a uniqueness, you have to sell that all the time. But if an industry is changing, ITIL was something that was happening across industries, across different vertical sectors.
Now, you mentioned the acronym prior, but what is that again?
ITIL stands for IT Infrastructure Library. The government, the UK government, the United Kingdom, the English government, they had so many vendors that were doing different things for England that they said, we need a common way of doing it. And you can see over the last 20 years, 30 years, how computers have influenced the way we work on a regular basis. So many of our clients and so many of the larger firms in the area, they couldn't do what they do today without the influence of IT, without the computers that help from an underlying basis run their companies. And our goal is to try to make it so that they don't have to worry about the fact that they're running. And if you think about, and when I talk at a number of seminars, we talk about, well, what does it mean for this managed service? What's ITIL? What's all this about underneath? Think about a cruise ship and what happens. Everybody gets to see what's above the waterline. They get to see all the big ballrooms and the stores and all the other things that are out there, the casinos. But they never get to see under the waterline. They never see the engines running. They never see all that stuff. Our goal is to be just like those guys down in the engine room, making sure everything runs so that nobody ever thinks about the engines.
Interesting.
We just want to make it run. And we want to do it the best way we can so that they can add more value. Every time you add something to an IT infrastructure, we want you to get the best value out of that right out of the gate. Because what happens is if you don't take care of that infrastructure the way we're talking about, what will happen is you'll add more problems. And you won't get the value that you wanted to get out of that investment that you put into it. So For me, that's why we've gravitated so heavily toward what we do today.
All right, this has been great. How can the viewers and the listeners get more information about Court Square?
Well, they can go to our website, www.csdg.com. They can send, if they're interested in anything that we do, they can look over the website. We have a number of white papers that are out there talking about both our project side of our business as well as our managed service side of our business. And they can send an email to info@csdg.com, and we respond to that. We'll have somebody either from our technical department talk to them or marketing or sales or whatever is needed.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Keith, for coming over. That's great.
Thank you, Gordon.